A few days ago, deep fakes of Donald Trump went viral. They visualized the potential arrest of Trump. They showed Trump running away from the cops, Trump in an orange jumpsuit sitting alone behind bars inside a federal prison. Those pictures were all fake, but reality is inching closer to what they showed. Donald Trump has been indicted, he's been criminally charged, and this is a first. Never before has a former president of America faced criminal charges. And this will have wide-ranging implications on Trump's life and career for sure, but also on the presidential election, on the fate of the Republican Party, and on America's democracy at large. The world's oldest democracy is again in uncharted waters. Will this indictment further divide the United States of America? Let's try and answer these questions one by one. Question number one, what are the charges against Donald Trump? We don't know the specifics, they're yet to come out. But this is about Trump's hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. This was just before the 2016 presidential election in the US. Stormy Daniels is a porn star. In 2006, she's said to have had an affair with Donald Trump. In October 2016, she was paid $130,000 US. What for? To remain silent about the affair. Because Trump was running for president and the media was gunning for him and they were looking for a story. So they contacted this porn star and she apparently wanted to sell the story of the alleged affair with Donald Trump. It would have been damaging in the election. So Donald Trump's team tried to stop this. His then lawyer, Michael Cohen, stepped in. He allegedly paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. And none of this is illegal. Neither the affair nor the money paid to keep it secret. Hush money is legally okay in the US. So what is the case about? Donald Trump had to reimburse Cohen for this payment. And he did pay the $130,000 back, but this payment, where Trump reimbursed his lawyer, was recorded as a legal fee. And that was a lie. It was not legal fee, it was hush money. Donald Trump lied, and prosecutors say that this is a criminal offense. He is being accused of falsifying business records, and that's the reason why he's in trouble. Question number two, what is Trump's response? He denies any wrongdoing. He calls the case a political witch hunt. He also denies having had an affair with Stormy Daniels. But Donald Trump did admit to paying his lawyer, Michael Cohen. The former president released a statement. He called the prosecutor in this case a disgrace. He accused him of doing Joe Biden's dirty work. Let me read out from Donald Trump's statement. The Democrats have lied, cheated, and stolen in their obsession with trying to get Trump, but now they've done the unthinkable, indicting a completely innocent person in an act of blatant election interference. Question number three, what happens next? Donald Trump has to appear in court. He'll have to fly to New York for this, and this will happen on Tuesday, that's the 4th of April. On that day, Trump's fingerprints will be taken, he will have his mugshot taken, and then he'll appear before a judge. And that's where all the formal charges will be read out. Trump will be allowed to enter a plea, guilty or not guilty. He is likely to say that he is not guilty. He is likely to contest the charges against him. Reports say Donald Trump will then be allowed to head home.
Trump will be given the opportunity to appear in court. He's not going to be arrested. Now, he will be booked, which means he'll be fingerprinted, he'll have his mugshot taken, but he's certainly not going to be placed in handcuffs. He's not going to be put in a cell with the general population.
Question number four, when will the trial begin? Not in a hurry. Legal experts say a trial is still more than a year away.
This is a very, very big step and a big historic moment, but it's going to be many months, maybe even approximately a year before a trial, if there ever is one, would go forward. And so we are a long way away from Donald Trump actually suffering lasting consequences for his actions.
But this could hurt Donald Trump's White House plans, which brings us to question number 5. Can Donald Trump still run for president? Technically, he can. There is no law that bars a candidate from campaigning if they're found guilty of a crime. And such a person could even become the president of the US and serve as president even from a prison. That's what the law says. And Trump certainly has not given up. Last evening, his team sent out fundraising emails. The Republican Party is rallying around him, and the voices of support are getting louder.
Do you really think that these charges are going to go through? Do you really think that they're going to take President Trump out of the running for president because of some old horse face story? No, I don't believe that for a second. No, I'm going to vote for President Trump.
Next question. What is Trump's strategy? How does he plan to counter this? Trump has resorted to doing what he does best, painting himself as a political martyr and asking supporters to fight the charges from the streets. He has already asked his supporters to protest. Many of them turned up outside his resort in Florida. There were crowds outside the White House too, and more of them are expected to show up next week when Trump's first appearance in the court is scheduled. Last question. Can Donald Trump fight this? Honestly, it's a tough one because this could be just the beginning of Trump's legal troubles. He's being investigated in several other cases, including a probe into the U.S. Capitol riot of January 2021, the effort to overturn his loss in Georgia in the 2020 election, and over the handling of classified documents after leaving office. Trump could face criminal charges here too. Does he have the appetite for so many legal battles? It's hard to say. He's prevailed against odds in the past, and when cornered, he tends to respond with an explosive backlash. With his die-hard supporters now entering the picture, the tension is only shooting up. 3 days ago, a Trump supporter was arrested. She brandished a knife at a family. Now, security arrangements are being made for his appearance. Donald Trump is going on trial, but outside the court, America's unity is being put to the test. Our next story has two parts, two headlines. One, the International Court of Justice has ruled against the US and in favor of Iran. And two, Russia will be the president of the United Nations Security Council for the next 1 month. Let this sink in while we tell you that Iran doesn't gain anything with the court win, and the West will have to go through the motions at the Russian-led Security Council. Makes you wonder how ineffectual and sometimes absurd these international bodies are. Let's start with the case of Iran. This is what happened. It has achieved a small victory over the US. And this is thanks to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. America has been imposing sanctions against Iran. It has also frozen Iranian assets. Now, the ICJ has ruled that the move was illegal and that the US must compensate Iran for freezing some of its assets. It says the US violated a treaty from 1955 and must pay damages to Iran. But don't expect non-alcoholic champagne showers in Tehran just yet. It's a Pyrrhic victory at best. Iran had sued the US for seizing over $2 billion worth of assets. The bulk of these were Iran's central bank funds. They were stored in a Citibank account in New York. The funds are worth about $1.75 billion. The ICJ says this amount is out of its jurisdiction. Well, what about the rest? $250 million. Will Iran be compensated for that amount? It's unlikely. The ICJ has given the US 2 years to work out a compensation deal with Iran. And if they don't agree, then it will step in and decide the fine. Well, you could think fine. If nothing else, the US will have to pay in 2 years from now. But that too may not happen because who will make Washington pay? You see, the ICJ cannot actually make anyone do anything. Let's look at what the ICJ really is. It's the United Nations top court based out of The Hague in the Netherlands. It's also sometimes called the World Court. The ICJ is supposed to be the final arbiter for international disputes. All ICJ rulings are binding. But, and this is the key part, the ICJ has no means to enforce its judgments. The court is toothless. A number of countries, including the US and Iran, have ignored its rulings in the past. Then what's the point of all of this? Why give Iran false hope? Honestly, we don't have an answer. Maybe it's just a feel-good exercise, something to keep judges and lawyers busy. Either way, it seems like a huge waste of time and absolutely ridiculous. Much like another development we want to talk about. Starting tomorrow, Russia is going to head the United Nations Security Council. Yes, again, you heard that right. It's going to take the helm of the UNSC at a time when it's invading Ukraine. Now, this is actually standard procedure. The UNSC chair is a largely ceremonial role. It rotates between the 15 Security Council members every month. Russia was the chair last February, exactly when Putin declared his special military operation. Of course, the irony of it has not been lost on anyone. This is what the US had to say.
We urge Russia to conduct itself professionally during its scheduled presidency in April, and for the Council to continue to continue its important work on a number of issues of peace, security across the world. That said, we expect Russia to continue to use its seat on the Council to spread disinformation and to try to distract from the attempt to justify its actions in Ukraine and the war crimes members of its forces are committing and its outrageous violations of the UN Charter. A country that flagrantly violates the UN Charter and invades its neighbor has no place on the UN Security Council. Unfortunately, Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, and no feasible international legal pathway exists to change that reality. That is what we are living with currently.
She says that's what we are living with. And why is this the case? It's because the UN is a direct result of the old world order. It was formed after World War II, a war where the US and the Soviet Union were allies against Nazi Germany.
Those against?
The United Nations founders really did not think ahead. They happily laid claim to global dominance with their permanent Security Council seats and their veto powers. Now, the lack of foresight is making all global institutions seem absurd. All pomp and pageantry, but no results really. What's worse, they're reluctant to reform. These archaic institutions need to be changed for the new world. The vetoes need to go, and the power has to be redistributed. If not, then we'll just keep seeing ridiculous stories like this one. What if I told you that the Vatican helped Europe colonize the world, that it justified European colonialism in the name of spreading Christianity, that there are papal decrees that allowed European empires to take over entire countries? And for what? To allow colonizers to subjugate people, to take away their lands, wage war on their cultures, impose a self-conceived notion of racial superiority over them. And all of this just because the colonizers claimed that they were the ones who discovered new lands. So they had a right to rule over those new lands. Now, the Vatican has come forward and apologized for what it did. It has apologized for helping the colonizers. Here's a report.
Have you heard something called the doctrine of discovery? It's Europe's version of finders, keepers. It's what European colonizers used to subjugate the world. The doctrine was cited by Europeans who discovered new lands, and the doctrine traces its roots back to the Vatican and to the Catholic Church. Now the Church has apologized for helping colonizers in their conquests. On Thursday, the Vatican issued an unprecedented statement. It officially apologized for its historical role in justifying colonialism by European powers. The Vatican said, "The Roman Catholic Church repudiates those concepts that fail to recognize the inherent human rights of indigenous peoples, including what has become known as the legal and political doctrine of discovery." It also declared that the doctrine is not part of the Christian's faith, but the Vatican is centuries late. The doctrine of discovery is a concept laid out in the so-called papal bulls. What are these? These are usually official statements from the head of the Catholic Church. That would be the Pope. So no less than the popes were involved in justifying European colonialism. Their decrees were used extensively in the conquest of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Africa, and the United States. The colonizers claimed that they had the approval of the Church to have sovereignty, property, and commercial rights in lands they discovered. Here's an example. Papal decrees in the 15th century permitted Portugal to subjugate Muslims and the non-Christians in Africa. That's not even the ugliest part of these decrees. The Vatican was quite explicit when it came to who Europe could colonize. It could only be non Christians. So, colonialism was essentially used as a tool by the Vatican to spread Christianity across the world. And the colonized countries paid a huge price. Take Canada, for instance. Between the 19th and the 20th centuries, more than 150,000 indigenous children were taken hostage in Canada. They were snatched away from their families and lodged against their will in the re education institutions. Here, they were subjected to unspeakable atrocities. They were physically assaulted and sexually abused. Many of them didn't survive. They were buried in mass graves that are still being discovered in Canada. Last year, Pope Francis visited Canada. He apologized to the indigenous people for what the Vatican put them through. In 2015, too, the Pope apologized for the Catholic Church's action in Bolivia. He sought forgiveness not only for the offenses of the Church but also for the crimes committed against the native people during the so called conquest of America. Just so you know, European colonism was a vast and often very violent project. The whole world at some point or the other has been under the control of a European power. Look at the French Empire. It ruled over territory greater than the size of the Europe itself. Then there was the British Empire, the most notorious of them all. And its peak was about 25% of the world population was a subject of the British Empire. Apologies are welcome and long overdue, but preparations will be the closest they'll come to making amends.